大家好, this is Eric de Fontenay with MusicDish 独立小炒, recording from Beijing. April was kind enough to ask me to participate in the Year in Review Asia edition to give an idea of what 2020 has been like in China from the perspective of MusicDish, our perspective. And so, first, I think I should give some context. Um, of course, as everybody knows, the virus kind of started here in China, but it started at a particular time. It started right at about the lockdown was about 2 days before Chinese New Year, the Wuhan lockdown, and then that, of course, restrictions would spread nationwide, and people did not know basically what was happening, did not know what the future was, how long this would last, etc. And there was really the prospect for some serious consequences because Chinese New Year is the biggest human migration on Earth. Happens every year, and it's when nearly 1 billion people travel back home to their hometown to be with family, to celebrate in the new lunar year. Ironically enough, that new year, this new year, was the year of the rat. So, kind of ironic that we'd have a pandemic in the year of the rat. Prophetic, perhaps. Um, and so that led to concerns about the spread. By the time Wuhan was actually locked down, 5 million people had already left the city to go to their hometowns to be with family. At the same time, Lunar New Year is a time when China shuts down. Basically, all business shuts down for about 2 weeks. So it's not like factories were already shut down. Everything was already on a very slow go, and that, from an economic perspective, probably made COVID a less hard hit for China than it was for a lot of other countries that by the time it hit, say, in March, they were already fully in economic activity, getting into the spring and etc. From our perspective, I mean, what our plans were, we had several plans, but basically it was, to do what we do, which is representing, promoting, and touring foreign bands in China. And obviously, the virus would put a complete stop for that. Actually, our question at the beginning was, for how long? And what we would find out is that 2020, there was no way to bring any foreign bands into China. That kind of allowed us to, how should I say, um, allowed me to really look under the hood of the company and to look at what we were doing and to look at how did we want to change and how did we want to adapt. As I mentioned, the Lunar New Year is the year of the rat. And of course, pandemics are associated with rats, but also survival. The rat is an animal that survives. It's flexible. It's adaptable. And so we kind of took that kind of as our mantra and really looked at what we were doing. And it forced us to do what's happened in a lot of countries, and that is to focus on local talent and on the domestic market. And that was really important and a really, in the long term, great change for MusicDish. So we started a whole series of things, a playlist that were really focusing on what ended up being a boom time for the indie music scene here in China. Behind the Music series, which looked at some of the best emerging up and coming bands coming out of China, doing features, video on WeChat, all type of features on these bands. We've actually covered 24 bands in 2020. We're quite proud of that. We also started a project called Be Indie, which is an experiential project connecting indie music with other indie trends, whether it's in fashion, whether it's in art, whether it's in food, beverage, and really trying to give an experiential look at the whole indie lifestyle with music at the center of it. And all these projects were new projects and kind of reinvigorated a certain life into the brand. And at towards the end of the year has had a real impact on our social media and brand metrics. Our social media numbers have increased anywhere, depending on the platform, by 75 to 250%, which is quite good for the brand and for the future. By the time we came to the summertime, well, the fortunate thing in China is that the government imposed lockdowns and restrictions. These varied, of course, where you were in China. If you were in Wuhan, you suffered the hardest lockdown. If you were in Beijing, like myself, there were restrictions, but it wasn't quote unquote a lockdown. I still went out, actually did a fair amount of camping, hiking, and mountain climbing, which was great around Beijing. Um, but the government took a very hard stance. Restrictions are not lifted unless there are no local transmissions on 14 consecutive days. And I think what that helped to do was really to nip the virus in the bud, as we say in America, and allowed it to be so that really we could resume social, cultural, and economic life basically starting in June. So that by the time you came to July, bands were touring, a couple of festivals were starting carefully. By August, September, things were in full swing. And by October, the Golden Week holiday, there was a festival in nearly every city in China happening during that week. It was like the more actually than it was pre pandemic. Interestingly enough, I had anticipated that ticket prices for shows would be below pre pandemic levels in order to incite people to go out. Actually, kind of the reverse happened. I would say ticket prices were somewhat higher than pre pandemic, and shows were selling out left and right. Um, this, I think, is kind of a function over the last 2 years. There's been a real boom in new talent coming onto the scene. Uh, Part of this is due to a show on iQIYI, which is a kind of a Chinese version of Netflix, which developed a show called Summer of Bands, which really puts a spotlight on the indie band scene and has really brought that scene from the niche market to kind of a more mainstream awareness. And that has really led to a trickle down effect on festivals, live house shows, tours, and etc. Kind of the same impact that Rap of China had, say, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, on the hip hop scene. Basically, bringing hip hop into a more mainstream awareness, and you're seeing brands. Actually, many of the bands have been working with brands like Sprite, the drummer for Hedgehog, which is a famous Chinese band, famous indie band. The drummer was recently featured by Burberry. Never quite know how to say that word. Anyways, that brand. Um, so there's been a boom in the music, and somewhat when the restrictions were lifted, and for some reason, while officially there were restrictions, you could only have 50% attendance and etc. When it came to live house shows, it seems like the restrictions were not really enforced. Shows were packed, full, sold out. People didn't have masks. People were moshing. But as I said, they had basically nipped the virus in the bud. And there were travel restrictions for people coming from the outside. Those who could come had to quarantine severely. So we were able to resume life. For MusicDish, though, it was a challenging period during the summer. We wanted to be ahead of the curve. And so we actually booked our first show with a band called Dirty Moon and Shouting Nerds, two bands, in June. And unfortunately, right when the show was supposed to happen, we had a resurgence of the virus here in Beijing, connected with a big food market that brings in all the imported food to a market to then be distributed throughout restaurants and supermarkets and markets across Beijing. And this led to a renewal of the lockdown in Beijing. So we had to cancel that show. Then we tried again in July, and actually, this had nothing to do with the virus. This is when restrictions, okay, they got control. Restrictions were somewhat lifted. And then the venue that we had chosen got shut down by the authorities. So it seemed like we were going through a run of bad luck. We did another event that was actually connected to something that was really intrinsic to me. As I said, we really started focusing on the domestic market. But it was important for me to continue to be bringing overseas international music live experience into China. This is kind of part of our DNA. MusicDish is what I call a curated music discovery brand or platform. And so we partnered with, we turned to one of our partners, High Five, that's a copyright management company, and we launched High Live, a live streaming brand that initially operated on Huya, which is kind of the equivalent of Twitch, so a gaming platform, and Bilibili, that is somewhat analogous to YouTube. Later on, we would also be working with Showstart, which is the biggest ticketing company for indie music events. And we were working with actually West Side Music, which is based in Sweden, to create a live stream to showcase great Swedish bands. We had 3 bands. We were gonna live stream it, but we also wanted to do an offline event where we could screen the live stream for people in the music industry here in China, basically to showcase Swedish talent to them. And we did this so basically the idea was to have a kind of a conference showcase feel for invited guests. And we did this at the Danish Cultural Center in the Art District 798. And it ends up that the day we were doing it, we did it in the evening. By that afternoon, a video was spreading on social media of a woman in a mall less than a kilometer away from where we were doing our event who was crying because she just found out that she had contracted COVID. So half the people who were anticipated to come to the event didn't come. We still held it. It was quite good. We had great reaction from those who attended, but it was still kind of a hit. We felt like we were going through a little bad luck. So what we did was kind of put organizing shows aside and started focusing on being a support for all the tours and festivals that was happening. And that was, I think, a really good move. We really became a support for the live music scene and etc., doing promotional campaigns and etc. And that was quite useful. At the same time, we kept on live streaming. And for us, live streaming was not just bringing in interesting foreign artists into China, but was also a great way to scout new talent to sign for when we would be able to bring foreign talent to tour and etc. I'm actually happy to announce that we signed Engine, which is a band out of France that we live streamed during a live stream edition called Tasty Sounds of France. This was kind of Sounds of Sweden Part 2. We live streamed 5 bands from France, but we worked with the French Embassy in doing a screening of the live streaming, simultaneous screening at the French Institute here in Beijing. And basically, again, invited music industry people, cultural industry people, influencers, etc., to the screening so that we could gauge reaction. And based on that, we started talking with this band Engine and recently just signed them. So that platform, that project has yielded a lot of great things. Where should I go from here? We did ended up finally doing our own show just last Friday at Alto Studio. It is the first show, offline show, that's a product of the Behind the Music series. As I said, we featured 24 bands in Behind the Music, and one of the bands, Electric Cherry, we partnered with Gui Gui Sui Sui, which is also a Beijing local band, and we did an event. We were able to get Serpai, which is an e-cigarette company, as a sponsor, and we also previewed music videos by Stul Dagsland, which is a band on our roster from Norway, who we toured in 2019, and The 10th Saturday, which is a band from Thailand that we're looking to hopefully sign to tour in China, hopefully in the second half of 2021. And we have another event planned, our final one before the new Lunar New Year, January 23rd, with Eric Allen, a local blues Americana artist that we signed and whose album we released. So this is another part of what we focused on, was copyright, basically helping local and foreign artists, and especially labels, with the licensing, distribution, and promotion of new releases, as well as back catalog in China. And so that kind of describes a lot of the different ways that we adjusted from being a company that was really focused entirely, almost entirely, on developing, promoting, and touring foreign artists, to becoming, to some extent, more of a China-focused company in China. For 2021, well, we're hoping that with the new year, Lunar New Year, that's going to happen February 12th, that China will continue to have control over the virus, so that we're going to be able to do more live shows. We've just secured dates for March 6th and March 27th for our next shows post-Chinese New Year. It's going to be the year of the ox, so we're looking for stability, hard work, that are represented by the ox, and we're looking forward to it very much. We're going to be expanding on projects like Be Indie, Behind the Music series. We're actually planning next year to hold our first music awards for local indie talent that we will be doing at the end of 2021. We're hoping to be able to bring in the first overseas bands sometime in the second half of 2021, most probably not before November, but we will certainly be one of the first companies bringing in foreign bands if I have anything to say about it. I would say generally for China, the situation and the experience has been very different than for other countries. If you want, COVID was like a gut punch. But like most gut punches, kind of catch your breath again, you get back up, you get into the fight. Thankfully, the virus was brought under control, and the music industry was able to resume. In the meantime, it had innovated, it had strengthened, and I think the music industry is looking better now than it had pre-pandemic. And I think everybody's very much looking forward to 2021. The other thing I think that for me that's been important is that I have been looking more, almost all of the bands that we've signed to represent and tour in China have been bands from North America and Europe. Now we're shifting our focus very much on Asia, and we want to sign bands primarily from East Asia and Southeast Asia, and really start developing a network. We really have to look at Asia and stop looking outside to other places and developing the talent here and touring the talent around here, and to really strengthen this market. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to be looking forward to in 2021. And also making the outside world aware of the dynamic, growing market that East Asia and Southeast Asia is. I really believe that the future is here. One of the last things we've done, I would recommend everybody on December 19th, hop on Bunka Radio, Bunka radio.com, It is an online radio network based in Colombia, and they have been dedicated to promoting Asian music to Latin America. And we have actually a program set list of 11 great Chinese indie bands, and we worked with Bangkok Music City, Pai Liao, in also creating a Thai music set list to introduce Thai music. And there's some really great Thai bands, as I mentioned, the 10th Saturday. We also have Luck Peach. There's some other bands I've discovered at Bangkok Music City, which was held virtually this year, such as Forst, um, Gray Ray. So there's a lot of great talent here, and I think for us, dedicating ourselves to developing that and having China, because of the size of the market, as being kind of an anchor for that to develop internally within East Asia, Southeast Asia, is a role that we really want to play a lot. We also anticipate that probably the first air bubbles, meaning travel without quarantining, will be within Asia. So we suspect that this is where we're going to be able to bring the first bands. I wish everybody a great 2021. And yeah, thank you very much.